Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DMV Business Show. I'm your host, Otto Sevilla, and today I have a very special guest for you, Brett Lanier. Brett is the co-founder and CEO of Bettor Vision. Welcome to the show, Brett.
Thanks, Otto. Appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine. By the way, thank you for serving.
Oh, appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. So before we go into your personal journey, if you can just give the audience, Brett, just a brief general overview of what is Bettor Vision.
Sure. Yeah. So what we discovered was too many avid sports fans were wasting a lot of valuable time checking multiple apps to track all the performance across their traditional fantasy matchups, their daily fantasy contests, and then now their sports bets. So Bettor Vision is a free mobile app that aggregates all those accounts into one place to allow those consumers to kind of have a better view of all those accounts and their contests. We provide like an easily digestible dashboard for kind of a quick high level summary of your performance, as well as kind of more detailed views for price comparison, research analysis, that type of stuff, to ensure the consumer is getting the best deals and making better, more informed decisions. So it's something that we created, somewhat of a passion project when I decided to retire, and just launched last year on the Apple App Store in November, and trying to grow it now.
Awesome. I'm sure this was built due to personal frustration of yours, right?
Absolutely. Yes. It was based on my own negative consumer experience, and was like, this sucks. Like there's got to be a better thing out there. And I like searched around, couldn't find it. Was kind of inspired by the financial aggregators, right? Like I used Mint, but like Mint, Personal Capital, any of those. I was like, why isn't there something like this in this industry? And when I couldn't find that anybody else was doing it, I decided, let's build it. Let's do it.
Awesome. Brett, are you originally from the area here?
Not originally. So I was born in Texas, out in Galveston, Texas, out on the island. But when I was in first grade, I moved to the area, moved to Columbia, Maryland, in Howard County. And so grew up from first grade on there. I consider myself from Columbia. More that has shaped my life much more than being a Texan, right? And then now I'm back in the area. I'm back in Howard County again.
What brought the move from Texas to Columbia?
It was my dad's work. So he was he worked in college administration, right? Like
okay.
he was like assistant dean of students at the time, and got a job here in Baltimore. And so we moved here, and we had a family, funny enough, that we had been friends with. We lived in the Dallas area right before we moved here. And there was a family that we were like my mom and the other mom were in a babysitting co-op together, had a bunch of kids the same age, and they like a year before had moved to Columbia. And so when my mom, was looking at the Baltimore area and where they could possibly live, she was like, I want to live in Columbia so I could be close to the Tucci's. And we ended up moving there, and we're still friends to this day.
That's great. I do a lot of business in Columbia, more than anywhere in Howard County. And I know now it's probably one of the biggest cities in Maryland, and it's experienced a lot of growth the last couple of years or decades. I'm sure it's probably a little different back then growing up. How was it growing up in Columbia?
I loved it. I literally was just joking, I think yesterday, the day before, with a friend of mine. They had shared something on social media about it coming out recently, being like the number 6 best place in the country to live or something. I'm like, every year I'm surprised it's not number 1, right? Like it was such a great place to grow up. It's changed a lot. It's significantly bigger than when we were there. And the identity has changed some, but like the idea of Columbia was a planned community, and it was supposed to be like this utopia, right? It was one of the first places in the country where interracial marriages were accepted, where gay marriages or at least relationships were accepted. It was supposed to be this like melting pot, like the ideal of America, right? Where all these different groups and backgrounds would come together and grow up together. And so you realize that people were just people, right? Like, and it didn't matter. I mean, it does matter, like your background, and obviously your, heritage and stuff, but it didn't affect like relationships, and people were friends. And so the planned community was built around a lot of villages, where anything from like large single family homes to smaller single family homes to townhouses to apartments and condos, and then kind of low income housing, all were in that same village. It was built around this village center, so everybody would go to the same grocery store and dry cleaners, and there'd be an interfaith center and recreational facilities. And so all the kids would grow up together, and it didn't matter your socioeconomic background, like you were just friends.
Yeah.
And that I experienced that, and it was awesome. And I'm grateful every day that like I was so privileged to live in that community and grow up that way, and experience so many other cultures, and have some really good friends that came from that same background. It was hard moving away and realizing that the world wasn't all like that, right? Like that there was some different backgrounds and different beliefs than that. Everybody is we should care about everybody.
Yeah, and not everyone is as open as especially when you're going into a city like Columbia, like you mentioned. Yeah. What were you into, like, growing up? I'm sure you did. I think you told me you did even all through high school in Columbia. Were you into sports or any other activities?
Yeah, I was a big sports guy. Both my parents played basketball in college. I thought growing up, I thought I was going to go play basketball in college, and my dream was to go play in the NBA. And so I grew up actually playing some AAU basketball, and then made the basketball team my freshman year, but didn't ever get any playing time. Right, like so quickly realized I stopped growing in like 6th grade. So I'm like a short little 5'9" guy. My dad was like 6'2". I thought I was going to be taller than him. I went from like 6th grade, I was this tall guy that was athletic. And then each year I kind of started moving down and down, and then got into high school. And now I'm the little short guy, not quite as athletic as everybody else. So I realized I was good enough to play in high school, but it wasn't going anywhere after that. But played a lot of other sports, soccer, baseball early on. And then that eventually transitioned to football. And then after freshman year in high school, after that experience, played freshman football, played freshman basketball, and then realized if I want to, get some playing time this next year, I can't play football in the fall. I need to focus all summer and all fall, getting ready for basketball season. So kind of quit that for a little while. Picked up lacrosse in high school, had a good time with that. And then my senior year, picked soccer back up again. So played football, soccer, basketball, and lacrosse in high school. Basketball and lacrosse all 4 years, then football and soccer on the bookends.
Well, was your favorite sport basketball or?
Oh, by far. Yeah.
Okay.
Basketball has always been my love. It's transitioned now, right? Like now watching, I'm more of a fan of football. Sure. And basketball is kind of like a close number 2. But I love all sports. Like I love the idea of it. Sports reinforced a lot of the values that like my parents and kind of instilled of like, the hard work and teamwork and helping other people, giving your best effort, being selfless, all of those kind of things. Communicate, being a good communicator and helping others and all that kind of stuff. So I loved sports, especially team sports, and have always had, a desire to continue to be connected to them. So at one point when I was getting ready to retire from the Army, I thought maybe I'd go back and like teach high school so I could be a coach. Because I like teaching. I like that coach and kind of leadership of molding and influencing people as a coach, and then being connected to sports again. But then had this idea and went with this instead.
Were you thinking of coaching basketball?
I mean, that would have been the ideal.
Sure.
But that's hard to break into at times. So I would have probably taken anything. It probably would have been like basketball, lacrosse, football, soccer, baseball. Then just like whatever. If you're like, hey, be the golf coach, be like, okay, I don't know how to play golf really, but I'm good at putt. I'll mold them into good humans, though. Like
Yeah. Do you have any children yourself?
I do. I've got four. My oldest son is 16. He's a junior in high school. And then I've got a 9-year-old son, a 6-year-old son, and a 1-year-old daughter.
Oh, so you got the girl at the end.
Yeah. So we were pregnant as I was retiring and moving back here. It was a lot of things all at once. It was a little overwhelming to be like retiring, moving, selling a house, buying a house, me changing jobs, doing a startup, my wife changing jobs, having a baby. It was a little bit overwhelming last summer, but it's worked out.
I was asking too because I'm sure I don't know if you've had the opportunity to coach your children in sports or basketball. So maybe there's a chance there.
Yeah, I've definitely thought about that. I haven't got the little ones into the sports yet. Unfortunately, like right about the age they were probably getting ready to, um, begin youth sports.
Yes.
We just moved to Chicago. COVID happened and everything got shut down for a year, and then moved here. And this last year, been a little overwhelmed. But that would be the dream. And then it was tough. My oldest, as we were moving around, we moved about every 2 years while I was in the Army. So never ended up doing that, but yeah, would love to.
Yeah, I'm a little similar that growing up, I preferred basketball, playing basketball, hoops with my friends, even though most of my time was spent on the soccer field playing soccer, just because most of my friends were playing soccer. But I loved playing basketball or even watching. I grew up watching MJ, Jordan. I don't know if you have a favorite player, but it was just magical with the Bulls back then. And that was it was a highlight. I remember clearly sitting in my apartment in DC, just watching playoffs. I forgot who the Bulls were playing, and just Jordan, his shots was just like, wow. And that just even brought me more into the sport. I think MJ brought a lot of people more into the sport internationally.
Probably did more for the sport than anybody else in history, right? Just the time, like the perfect timing of, kind of globalization a little bit with media and the superstar of Michael. And then additionally, like all the sponsorships and stuff kind of exposed people that weren't watching the games already, and then probably helped expand that quite a bit.
And now that we're talking about what MJ did to the sport, it reminds me a little bit. I guess the latest athlete I've seen it is McGregor, Conor McGregor with MMA, what he's done. Even though he hasn't fought in some time, but it's sort of he definitely has grown MMA. Just with his persona and everything.
Absolutely, yeah. Before him, Ronda Rousey a little bit, especially with the women's divisions, I guess, and yeah, Connor. When you have that like perfect storm of the talent and the personality, or that gravitas that like just everybody's like, I've got to watch them. Sometimes it's because of the wild, crazy things they might say or the like antics. And sometimes it's just like the absolute dominant performances. And you're like, you can't miss this. It's like similarly like Mike Tyson in boxing in the 90s. Like, you're like, I've got to watch this because, he might knock this guy out in 30 seconds. Right. Like, so it's amazing.
So you finished high school in Howard County, right?
Yep. Oakland Mills. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oakland Mills. I was just on Oakland Mills Road last week, showing some space.
Nice. Yeah, I lived just off Oakland Mills Road. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Do you are you now residing in Columbia, or just?
No, we're out a little further west, a little place called Lisbon. Yeah. But I definitely went when we were moving. We're getting ready to retire. We're moving back. My wife's from Baltimore.
Okay.
And so her family's still here. Most of my family's moved away, but still have a lot of friends here. And she was like, "We got to move to Baltimore." And she wanted a big yard with a little bit of fenced in yard and all that kind of stuff, which is hard to find in Columbia. But I was like, we have to move it to Howard County because I want my kids to have the experience that I did in this like diverse community with really good, education is also very important to me. It's good schools, that kind of thing. So
yeah, number one, Howard County in the state of Maryland.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
those were the things that were really important to me. And she wanted the land, so we kind of compromised, and we're in Western Howard County. Yeah.
Yeah. No, Lisbon's a great area, right off of 70. I'm familiar. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Exactly. So after high school, do you know as far as what you want to do, Brett, or what are you thinking then?
Yeah, I thought earlier in high school, probably around sophomore year, I thought I wanted to go join the military, right? My grandfathers had both served, one in the Navy, one in the Marines. The World War II, Korean War time, like probably most of our grandparents. And then my stepfather had been in the Navy for a little while. And so I had a desire to serve. We didn't have a lot of money. My parents, after the divorce, it was a little tighter. So they told us, look, you need to either get a college scholarship or join the military, So I thought I wanted to go to the Naval Academy and go be a Marine fighter pilot. That was the idea. Top Gun. I love Top Gun. I love this book by Pat Conroy called The Great Santini, which is about like this Marine fighter pilot and his son who plays basketball. And it was just one of those things I wanted to do. And it aligned with a lot of the sports stuff, right? Like the military is very similar to team sports, right? Like all those, the teamwork and communication, all those things. It's very similar. And, most sports similarly pull their language from the military, right? Like if you watch a football game, they talk about the lineman being in the trenches, or the floor general is the point guard, or, you're going to battle with the other team. Like we use a lot of that similar language. So it seemed like that's what I wanted to do. I thought I was going to go to the Naval Academy. I applied there, and then ended up going to West Point instead. Basically I made a huge mistake. I got a DUI my senior year in high school. So I got into the Naval Academy, was a principal nominee there. And then, I think March or April of my senior year, did something stupid, was out partying with some friends, and got a DUI. Was under the legal limits, but because you're under 21, you can't have any alcohol in your system. So got charged, then got the charges dropped, talked to a lawyer, went to the counseling to make sure I didn't have a problem, and then went to a bunch of classes and, did all these things that I could to show that, like, look, I don't want this to happen again. I'm trying to be responsible. The charges got dropped. So the Naval Academy probably would have never found out about it, but, they have an honor code. And so I was like, I feel like I should let them know. So like I wrote a letter, I went over, took a day off of school, went to meet with admissions, gave them the letter explaining, like, this is what happened. This is what I've done about it. This is why it's never going to happen again. I just want to be honest with you. And within a few hours, talked to like the head of admissions and the commandant there, and they were like, you're not coming here anymore. We're calling your senator and telling him, or congressman at the time. Sorry. So Ben Cardin was my congressman, now Senator Cardin, and telling him what happened. And then we know you applied to West Point, so we're calling them and telling them what happened as well. And basically like crushed my dreams in that day. It was a long 30-minute drive back from Annapolis. And so at that point I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like I thought I was gonna do this. We'll figure it out. I had an academic scholarship to Towson, so I was like, maybe I'll go there. And then a couple weeks before graduation, got a letter in the mail from West Point, and it was my acceptance letter. I'm like, what is going on? Like, I thought they knew about this. I was like, I should call them and make sure there's not a mistake. My mom was like, no, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. You tried to do the right thing the first time, and it didn't go well for you. So, this is just accept it. And I was like, no, I think I need to try to do the right thing. So I called up admissions and was like, hey, I'm Brett Lanier from Columbia. Here's the deal. Here's what happened. I thought you knew about it. I thought Naval Academy told you. So just wanted to know, like, is there a mistake? Did you know? Like, does this affect things? And they said, we know what happened. We appreciate your honesty. We want you to come anyways. At that point, I was like, cool, come in there. So I felt very grateful towards West Point, and felt like I probably didn't deserve to be there. And so it probably made me work a lot harder when I was there, trying to make, like, kind of earn the grace that they gave me. Because they easily could have been like, no, you're not coming here. Go, you made a mistake. You're a stupid kid. So I got a second chance and was very grateful for that.
You said you had an academic scholarship to go to Towson, so your grades were pretty good during high school, I assume.
Yeah, so I did pretty well in high school, and then like standardized tests and stuff like that. So that, yeah, like, was academic all-state in basketball. Was not a starter, but like did all right academically. Yeah.
That's great. So once you come to West Point, that's a totally different world than what you're used to.
Yeah, that was a shock to the system. That first year, this first summer, especially what they call beast barracks, the like cadet basic training, where they turn you from a civilian into a military person, was rough. That was a shock. It was hard, but similarly to, again, with the sports analogy, you get through it by like helping each other out, right? Like by looking out for each other when one person doesn't know how to shine their shoes very well, like, like, sucks to be you. Like the people that are good at it, like, sit there and help and teach and coach, and you look out for each other. And it was a really cool experience. And because of that really hard, difficult, challenging time that we went through together, those people that I was in that unit with for basic training, I'm very close to still. And then those first 2 years, the people that I was did my plebe year with, which is also very difficult. I'm very close to, again, to this day. So what's funny is a lot of those people are like some of the early investors in my current company. They were in my wedding, I was in their wedding, like very close with all of them still.
Well, that's great that you still have that strong relationship with them. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you went to West Point, Brett, did you know, as far as once you're there, what I'm going to focus on, what I want to do, or how'd you find your way?
I had no idea early on, because the thought was the fighter pilot thing. Army doesn't have planes and jets, so was like, I'll figure it out. I got 4 years. We'll see. I had always been kind of strong in math, so I decided to major in operations research systems analysis, ORSA, which is like math and systems engineering or industrial engineering. Some colleges call it. Now you might call it like data analytics. And so I went down that path academically, but like that doesn't affect the job you do once you graduate, right? When you go in the Army, you could major in anything. It doesn't really matter. So I thought initially, after a little time there, that I wanted to go into the infantry and become a airborne ranger and go special forces, and do kind of, cool, badass things, like that's kind of like being a Marine fighter pilot. You're like, oh, that's pretty awesome. I'm like, well, what's pretty awesome in the Army? Oh, being a special forces dude. So thought I would do that. And the summer between my junior and senior year, I went to go do our internship. You go out to the Army for a month during the summer and basically intern with a unit and see what it's like and decide if that's the branch of the military or the branch of within the Army you want to go. And my junior year, they started a pilot program where you could go to one of the Ranger battalions or one of the special forces groups. And so I applied and got selected for that. And so I went down to the 1st Ranger Battalion and did my internship with them. And it was a very eye-opening experience. And, had another big failure there, right? Like I showed up and, my initial counseling was like, we don't want you, right? Like, we don't want you to be here. You don't deserve to be here. You haven't been to Ranger school. You haven't been through the Ranger officer professional education, whatever it's called, rope. So you shouldn't be here. We don't care that you did a little tryout at West Point, but we're stuck with you. So, while you're here, we'll do some training with you. So I didn't feel welcome from the beginning. And the officers there kind of made it very clear they didn't think I should be there. but got to do some really cool stuff, right? Like we did some, demolitions training, advanced rifle marksmanship, some close quarters combat stuff, which is kind of like Brazilian jiu-jitsu way back before everybody was doing it. And, room clearing, practicing going through buildings and clearing rooms. Again, now it's very common throughout the Army, but back then the Rangers and the Special Forces were kind of the only ones doing it with live ammunition. So like you'd have 4 or 5 guys in a room shooting like inches away from each other, which scared, I was like, look, I'm not a Ranger. Like, I don't know if I should be doing this. But we went through that training. And then my last week there, they did something called an emergency deployment readiness exercise, an EDRI. And so each of the Ranger battalions are always on call in case anything happens in the world, like something like the Ukraine or Syria or Yemen or whatever. They have to be ready to go a moment's notice. They've got bags pre-packed, and when you're on alert, you wear a little pager, or back then you did. Maybe it's cell phones today, I don't know. And I don't know if you've ever seen like the 80s movie with Charlie Sheen, Navy SEALs, but like it's just like that. They, in that movie, they're at a wedding for one of the guys on the Navy SEAL team, and all their pagers go off, and they just like leave the bride at the altar, and like they all leave to go do this thing. So it's like that. It was a training exercise to like prepare them for that type of thing. So they decided ahead of time that I would be allowed to go with them, and we were going to fly from Savannah, Georgia to Louisiana, where the Joint Readiness Training Center is, and jump out of the airplane and into this pretend airfield, and then basically walk through this swamp, the swampland, for about 20 kilometers, so about 13 miles or so, overnight, and then do like this urban assault on this little built-up village they have there, to like rescue some hostages. That was the idea. Was back then in the early 2000s, it was kind of a mix between like Bosnia, Kosovo, and what had happened in Somalia, Mogadishu, Somalia. So there, wasn't declared hostilities, but there were some UN peacekeepers, and they got captured by this group that was hostile to the US, but like we weren't enemies per se, but we were going to rescue these people. And so it was my first time jumping out of an airplane at night. When I went to airborne school the summer before, you jump out of the airplane 5 times in that 3-week training period. I happened to go the week before 4th of July weekend, so we were graduating, and they wanted to get everybody out early. So instead of our final 2 jumps being night jumps, they were all day jumps. So it was going to be my first night jump. We go to get on the plane, and we don't have any parachutes on. And normally, like in airborne school, like you put on the parachute, and then somebody comes and like checks all your stuff. And then you sit there for like half an hour, and somebody comes and like checks all your stuff again. And like you get checked like 3 or 4 times before you even get on the plane. We're getting on the plane. I'm like, where are our parachutes? Like, what's going on? And they said, oh, we're going to just do an in-flight rig. I'm like, what's that? And they're like, you put on your parachute, you check your buddy, he checks you, and then you jump out of the plane. And I was like, I don't feel comfortable doing this.
Gosh.
Like, whatever. I was like, look, somebody, I'm comfortable somebody checking me off, but I don't want to, I don't want to put somebody else's life in my hands. I don't know what I'm doing. So somebody check that other guy out. So we're getting ready to go. Back it up a little bit. When I first got there, when they're issuing equipment for the month of training, they, for whatever reason, were short on compasses. So I didn't have a compass. And part of the mission was like, you jump out of the plane, there's 600 people jumping out of all these planes that are flying into this area. And we all meet out in the woods off the airfield. Well, the way you figure out where you're going to go meet everybody is you shoot an azimuth. You're like, oh, 48 degrees, I'm going to follow this path into the woods. I'm like, well, I can't do that. I don't have a compass. What do I do? So the guy that I was kind of shadowing, the platoon leader, was like, look, just jump behind me in the stick. Usually, 30 guys or so line up, and I'll jump out of the door, one after the other. Like every second, somebody's jumping out of the door. He's like, just jump right behind me, And, so we'll land kind of close to each other. We'll link up and we'll run to the place together. I'm like, okay, cool. And we, stand up and hook up. The way it works is it's not like normal skydiving. You jump out and you free fall and you pull your cord. In the military, you're jumping very close to the ground, right? Like in this scenario, people might be shooting at you, right? Like you're usually jumping into a place. The reason you're jumping is you can't land, right? Probably because you don't control the ground. There's people hostile there. So we're jumping normally like between 500 to 1,000 feet off the ground. So you're free fall for a second or two, and then your chute opens. And you want to minimize that amount of time you're hanging in the air. So you hook this little cord onto this like steel cable that runs through the plane, and it's however long, 30 or 40 feet long. And when you get that far out of the aircraft, it pulls your chute open.
Okay.
So we stand up, we hook up. I'm the very end of the the last guy in the line. And when they fly over the place where you're supposed to jump, the pilots hit a light, a switch in the front. The little green light by the door goes on, and everybody's like, go, 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 go. Everybody's just jumping out as fast as they can. So we're going, I'm shuffling around. I'm like super nervous. We get to the door and the light goes red right as the platoon leader's in the door. And basically, if you're in the door when the light goes red, you can either jump or not jump. It's dangerous to jump, but it's also, if you like hesitate, you could like get sucked out and it's bad. So he ended up jumping. He landed in the trees of the swamp. So that's, they were not over the safe area anymore. So they hit the red light. And so the guy's like, stop, stop, stop. So I stopped. Now we're separated. I'm like, oh no, what do we do? Guy's like, oh, don't worry, unhook. We're making another pass. You can jump on the next pass. I go to unhook and I can't get the hook undone. And I'm messing with it for a couple minutes. We come back around and the jump master's like, look, you got to move to the front of the plane. I got to get this next group out. So then they jump, and now my hook is like all those hooks that they had that had the cords holding their like little backpack things. I'm stuck, up on that thing. And he's like, sorry, man. Like he tried to get it off. He couldn't get it off. He's like, sorry, man, I guess you're not going to jump. I was going to be the radio telephone operator. So I was the guy carrying the big radio. And I had like, all these extra batteries for all the little squad radios and had this big basically pack. It was like 98 pounds. And told him like, hey, I've got to go on this mission. Like I've got all the radio stuff. Like they're not gonna be able to communicate without me. I've got to be down there. And he's like, I don't know what to do. Finally, one or two more passes come. They're coming around for the last chance to jump. And he pulls a knife out of his pocket, cuts my cord, pulls another hook out, ties it to the end, and is like, go hook up. And basically, I'm about to jump out of the plane, and if his knot holds, my parachute opens. If it doesn't, I've got the rest of my life to figure out how to open my reserve, spoiler alert, like obviously, so I was already nervous and anxious and stress levels were high. Now it's like through the roof. We go, I jump out, parachute opens, obviously. I have a pretty bad landing. But then, get up, throw on the pack and start sprinting to go meet up with everybody. And I have no idea where I'm going, right? I was supposed to shoot like an azimuth 48 degrees. I'm like, well, I knew, when I landed, I looked and saw the planes were flying due north. So I'm like, okay, 48's kind of that way, and I'm just kind of running. And every time I'd run into somebody, I'd be like, hey, can you shoot me an azimuth 48 degrees? And they kind of show me, and I'd just follow that way. By the time I got there, it's July in Louisiana. And it's 105 degrees with 100% humidity at midnight, right? Like I've got a 98-pound backpack on, heavy pants and shirt and helmet and all that. I'm just pouring sweat. I was in pretty good shape at the time and was just drenched by the time I finally get into the swamp and meet up with the guys. In hindsight, I didn't take care of myself as well as I should have. I wasn't drinking enough water in the few days beforehand. And over the next couple of hours, as I eventually meet with the group and we start marching through the swamps, I eventually went down as a heat casualty, right? Like I was super dehydrated. I probably toughed it out tried to tough it out too long. Should have, let somebody know earlier on that I was kind of losing it. But, at that point, like, you're not all there. And they had to medevac me out. And so as a result, like when the whole mission was over and they came and got me from the hospital, they like ripped into me. The leaders, the captain who was the commander, came and talked to me and was like, if you were a real Ranger right now, your career would be over, right? Like you'd be immediately relieved of the platoon, you'd be kicked out of the Ranger battalion, and your career's over. You're done. You can't go down as a leader, all that kind of stuff. So that was crushing. Then the platoon leader came and kind of lit into me, kind of same kind of stuff. Luckily got back and there was only a couple days left. And got my final evaluation, and the commander of the whole unit, the lieutenant colonel, later ended up being like a 4-star general, commander of CENTCOM's, SOCOM, Special Operations Command. He wrote me his eval. It was like, this guy should not be Ranger, should not be in the infantry, and all this kind of stuff. So that was crushing. Get back to West Point. I'm like, I guess I'm not going to do that. Like, I don't know what I want to do anymore. And about a week later, it was time to pick branches. And I was like, always thought I wanted to go infantry and special forces. I don't know, maybe I'll go aviation. I'll go back to what I was going to do before. So I picked, luckily had done well enough at West Point. It was high enough in our class. I picked aviation and got to go to helicopter training. So that was, sorry, long story that has nothing to do with my business in the DMV, but yeah, very, very big failure. But
no, but you end up flying helicopters for most of your career, right? In the service?
For the first half, yeah.
Okay.
So went to flight school after graduating West Point, got Blackhawks, did well there, got Blackhawks, got stationed in Germany. So went to Germany first. They were just getting ready for the invasion of Iraq. Went to Baghdad during the early part of May of 2003. We were there for 15 months, and then just was a platoon leader there. So I had 4 Black Hawk helicopters and about 20 some people I was in charge of, just flying people around the Baghdad area mostly. And then after we came back, spent a couple more years in Germany, then moved to Kansas, became a commander of a air assault company. So I had 10 Black Hawk helicopters, about 50 people, and we would, put the infantry guys in the back, go in a bad guys' front yard and or where they were hiding, and those guys go in, kick in the door, go grab them, put them in the helicopter. We'd fly them back to the detention facility or whatever. So went back to Iraq for another 15 months during the surge in September of 2007, another 15 months to December 08. That time we were to Crit, Iraq, kind of the northern, in the northern area. So during the surge, they sent a lot of the troops to Baghdad. We struck a deal with the Sunnis in Anbar province, where like Fallujah and Ramadi were. And so all the kind of bad actors, the people that were essentially Al-Qaeda in Iraq under Zarqawi, they all fled north. These were the guys that were like so extreme that like Al-Qaeda wouldn't associate with them. They were like, no, you're not part of us. They were essentially the precursor to ISIS.
Sure.
And then, so we were basically doing air assaults, trying to capture those guys everywhere north of Baghdad, an area about twice the size of Pennsylvania is where we flew. So kind of all over the place. And that was an exciting time. And then while I was there, was deciding whether I wanted to stay in the Army or get out. Decided if I was going to stay in, I wanted to maybe go teach. So applied to go teach back at West Point, got selected. And so then I went to business school. And then after business school, taught at West Point for 3 years, teaching leadership, which is military leadership is a mandatory course for the juniors. And then marketing and international management for the management majors. And then when I was leaving there, I hadn't been flying for, almost 6 years at that point, right? So 2 years in business, the 6 months after we got back, before I went to business school, the 2 years in business school, the 3 years teaching, and then I had to go to the Command and General Staff College for a year. So I was like, it's going to be more than 6 years since I flew. Probably don't want to go back to an aviation unit and try to get back into that. And as a commissioned officer, you don't fly a lot once you get senior. I was a major at the time. As a major and lieutenant colonel, you don't fly a lot, right? You manage everything, which is not quite as fun as flying the aircraft. So I was like, that doesn't seem as sexy as it used to. So I switched over to become an ORSA. So the Army has a branch that's basically like internal consultants, right? Like we advise the commanders using data and decision analysis. So switched over to that branch, got stationed out in White Sands Missile Range, New Mexico. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. Lived in El Paso, Texas, which was about 50 miles south. It was my wife. So I married my wife while I was there teaching at West Point. We moved up, moved her and my stepson up to New York with me. But like every 2 weeks, we were coming down to Baltimore. My stepson's dad lived there, so bringing him down all the time. So we're still close. And then all of a sudden, it was time to get our next assignment, and the Army moved us almost as far away in the U.S. as they could. And it was like my wife and son's first time ever being a couple hour drive away from Maryland. And it was like, oh, now it's a couple of flights to get home. So that was tough. So I didn't want to move into White Sands Missile Range, which literally there was like 50 people living there. So we lived in El Paso, and I just commuted. And then did the data analytics there for a little while, and then moved to Tampa for Special Operations Command. And then my last assignment in the Army, I moved to Chicago to help stand up the Army's marketing office. So we shut down the office that we had used to be in the DC area over by Reagan and in Crystal City. And we're standing up a new organization that was kind of going to be the like digital age marketing organization. And based on my background teaching marketing and my MBA, the Assistant Secretary of the Army basically reached out and asked if I'd help stand that up. So did that for a couple of years, and then it was time to retire and moved home. So,
Brett, you mentioned your MBA. You didn't attend just any ordinary college for your business degree, right?
Yeah, I mean, I went to Wharton, which was it was a pretty good school. So I'm very
just
grateful.
Pretty good. It's okay.
it's all right. I've heard of it. I didn't know anything about business school. So I was like, oh, what are the best ones? I want to go to the best ones. So I applied to a couple and ended up getting into Wharton, and it was ideal because it was close to home. I also applied to like Georgetown and thought about University of Maryland because they both had pretty good schools as well. And I wanted to be in this area. I had a lot of ties here. So Philly was close enough that I decided that they kind of trumped it. So I went to Wharton. Made a lot of really good friends there. It was really good, really great experience there.
Yeah. I hear all the time, especially when people are attending Ivy League schools, whether for undergrad, grad school, whatever it may be, the network they say is just invaluable.
Oh my God. Yeah. I used to tell my cadets, because they'd always ask, they'd be like, oh, you went to business school. That sounds, they're management majors. They're like, oh, I think I want to do that someday once I get out of the Army, or maybe if I stay in. What should I do? Where should I go? And some of them since graduating, I've kept in touch with, and they've now gone back to business school and, kind of advise them through that process. And what I would tell them is the number one thing is the network, right? Like the people that you meet is the most important thing. And in business school, more than probably other programs, unfortunately, like the brand matters a lot, right? So, having that, Wharton, Harvard, Stanford, whatever on the degree, it gets you an interview, right? Like it might not get you the job, but like somewhat it helps with the resume, that kind of thing. But like what you learn there, it's probably not that different than what you'd learn if you took, some Kaplan courses. It's kind of like the Matt Damon quote from Good Will Hunting, right? Like you can learn the same thing, like reading books or watching videos. Most of that knowledge is out there. So the knowledge, if you're just looking for that, there's many other ways to do it, much cheaper because it's also very expensive. But there is a lot of value to that network. And when I was starting this business, like that network has been incredibly valuable to me. Some of the people that funded my family and friends round were people that were putting in money that were classmates from there, or that were advising me. They had also started, worked in the startup community, or they were venture capitalists, or they were private equity or investment banking people, and so they could teach me a bunch of things that, like, I didn't know anything about business, right? Like, that's not what the Army does. It's been super helpful.
Brett, how many tours did you do when you were serving?
So I only did those two 15-month tours
Okay.
in combat, and then I did. I spent about another 6 months total on a lot of smaller. I would, like, in the Army, we wouldn't call them deployments. On little trips to a bunch of other areas in the special operations thing. So Lebanon, Jordan, the UAE, Qatar, a couple other places in the Middle East, basically. Bahrain, I don't know, a couple others. But yeah, so about 3 years total.
Okay.
But two, I would consider 2.5 in combat. Yeah.
Out of the time that you served, and is there any particular mission that comes to mind that you feel comfortable sharing some of it, as far as what happened and maybe what you learned from it, and maybe the audience can gain some knowledge from that experience you went through?
Wow. Man, there's a lot of missions that went really poorly. So those are usually the best teachers, right? So I'm trying to think.
Well, whichever one comes to mind first,
Yeah. So I was on a mission. We did a daytime air assault, which we never do. The main reason, like, at night, we have a huge advantage, right? Like, we're flying under night vision goggles. We can see things. If the enemy doesn't have night vision goggles, that's a massive advantage, right?
Sure.
And so the chances of you getting shut down are much lower at night. Unfortunately, as the mission was wrapping up towards the end of my second tour, we were trying to hand over most of the policing to the Iraqi police and the Iraqi army. So we were doing a lot of missions together with them, and they were not yet at a level where we felt comfortable taking them on a nighttime air assault raid, which is one of the most complex and dangerous things you can do. So we found this group of about 10 Al-Qaeda and Iraq guys that were they kind of taken over this little village in a remote part of northern Iraq near Beji. And we're going to take the police to go, the Iraqi police and Iraqi army units, to go get them. So it was a bigger air assault. We had 6 Black Hawks and 1 Chinook, and then a couple of Kiowa Warrior aircraft for kind of overwatch and to scout for us. And we were doing it in the daytime, so the Iraqi army and police could go and do their thing in a less complex environment, but it significantly increased the risk to the aircraft flying. So we get there. The mission was, we were going to bring about 150 people to basically surround the town. It was a tiny little town. We were landing 2 Blackhawks in each 3 of the corners, and then a Chinook in the 4th, and put 20 to 30 guys at each place, basically cut the town off and circle it, and then most of the aircraft would go back and pick up the rest of the force, bring them in, and they would slowly go through and search the houses. The safest, kind of most methodical way of doing this type of thing when you don't know exactly where they are is what we call a cordon and search. We cordon off the village, and then you methodically search it to make sure you can find the people. As most of the aircraft went to go go pick up the rest of the force, my aircraft and my wingman were staying there as a quick reaction force. So we dropped them off and then stayed there in case anything went bad right away. We would be able to pick up the troops from any other part of the town and go fly them and relocate them to where they needed to be, or provide overwatch with our machine guns from the helicopter from the air. Immediately when we went to go drop everybody off, the bad actors jumped into a couple of pickup trucks, loaded up a whole bunch of heavy machine guns, RPGs, that type of thing, and drove out of town, basically shot their way through one of the groups that were trying to block them. So the Kiowa Warrior helicopters went to go follow them out into the desert. The ground force commander asked us to go help out. And the Kiowas got into basically a gunfight with them, firefight, shooting back and forth between them, disabled one of the vehicles. But they eventually ran out of ammo, and they're tiny little helicopter. They don't carry a lot. And so we came and took over, and basically for about 30 minutes, we were in about a 30-minute long firefight with them, which if you think about a shootout, like a minute is a long time of shooting back and forth. We were, for like 30 minutes, we were shooting back and forth. We fired 4,000 rounds from my helicopter. And then we ended up, both my aircraft and our wingman both got shot up a little bit. But none of us got hit, and we ended up stopping, killing most of them, but capturing a couple. And towards the end, we had to go back and refuel and then come pick up everybody and bring them home. Well, my wingman's aircraft was a little too damaged. They couldn't come back and pick them up. We had been shot up, but we could still fly. What we realized real quick, as we went to go pick everybody up, we didn't have enough helicopters because we were down one, and we had to leave some people there. And I'm like, we just had a huge shootout here. This is not a good idea. We won't leave basically one helicopter's worth of people, 11 guys hanging out in this very remote area for a 30-minute round trip for the flight back. And so we decided to leave a larger force, and then my aircraft in the Chinook flew as fast as we could back, dropped off the people, and then flew basically at our top speed to go pick them up and then bring them back. But we're doing the math in our heads, as we're flying the troops back, do we have enough fuel potentially to go pick them up and make it back? And it was we probably don't, but we refuel, that's another 15, 20 minutes. So it's trying to make that hard decision of, do we take a higher risk that we may run out of fuel, or do we take this risk of leaving those people out there and something bad happening to them? So we didn't refuel. We flew out there, picked them up, and got back to the base. Basically, the low fuel lights are flashing for 10 minutes, and we're just come on, just a couple more minutes, and ended up making it back. But the lessons learned there, one was, I'd been shot at a lot, but I hadn't, I'd been there at that point 9 months there, plus the first 15 months. I'd probably been shot at 40 or 50 different missions, from RPGs, surface air missile, some anti-aircraft guns, but mostly, small arms, AK-47s. But never that close, right? Never had been hit before, right? So, and never were constantly engaging back and forth. So, in those moments, the most important thing was just keeping everybody calm, right? Everybody gets very excited, right? And trying to keep, I was flying with a lieutenant and trying to keep her comfortable on the controls and in command, and just kind of keeping a calm voice, talking her through, okay, we got a guy, he's 200 yards over here, he's at 10 o'clock, start circling to your left, just trying to communicate clearly and keep everybody calm was probably the key there. And in any crisis, obviously most business crises, you're not at risk of dying, but they can be scary, right? It can be oh, is our business going to go down? Is are we going to lose funding or whatever it might be? It seems very stressful and chaotic at times. And a job of a leader is to try not to get too excited, right? Like to try to stay calm and keep everybody else calm. Emotions are very contagious, right? So if you are like all worked up, everybody else is going to mirror that. So if you can stay calm, and stay confident and keep people, because people are scared, a lot of emotions come out in those times, and you don't think clearly. And so if you can keep them calm and less emotional and try to stick to the rational and logical, things usually go a lot better. So I think one of the key lessons was as a leader, my job wasn't to fly the aircraft. My job wasn't to shoot. My job was to direct and kind of manage the emotions of the moment. Maybe that's something business leaders can take from it. I don't know. Hopefully they're never getting shot at. But in stressful times, right?
Yes.
Like that's definitely part of it.
Thank you for sharing that story, Brett. You mentioned earlier, obviously, Bettor Vision came due to the frustration you were going through. Prior to starting the company, were you, if I can just take you back there, Brett, were you thinking of, hey, let me start, were you even just contemplating, let me start a business, let me go this entrepreneurship route, or how did that come about?
I wasn't originally. I thought that when I retired, I would potentially go into like management consulting, right? Thought I'd maybe go work for McKinsey or Bain or one of those companies, and leverage the data analytics, the Orsa stuff, problem solving type background. But when it was time to like go interview for jobs, I was like, man, this isn't what I want to do, right? Like I have this idea, I kind of want to go do that.
So you're interviewing for jobs, and at the same time, you're still thinking about this idea you have.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And at the time, I didn't know how I would do it, right? Like I was like, look, I've got this idea, but I've never built an app. I'm not a tech guy. Like I don't know how to do this. But a good friend of mine, a guy that I met at Wharton, his wife was one of my classmates, and he was dating her at the time. So we hung out a lot in Philly, and we'd watch football together, played some basketball together. You still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, sorry, my screen went away. So we stayed in touch. We played in fantasy football league together, funny enough, and had stayed in touch over those years. And then when I moved to Chicago, his family was one of the few that lived in that Chicago area. So there were basically three families that during COVID were like our little bubble, and it was him, Geoff, and his wife Megan and their kids, another friend Phil and Julia and their son, and then this other friend Chris and Liz and their kids. So during that time, he had been a management consultant, but he always wanted to work in sports. So he had quit his job right before COVID, and went back to business to get a master's degree in sports management and data analytics, and at Northwestern there in Chicago, and thought he was going to go work for like the Bulls or the Cubs or the White Sox or Bears or whoever, and then realized that was kind of a young man's game, right? They're hiring guys 22 right out of college to do that. So, but while he was in grad school, sports betting got legalized. They repealed PASPA. And so he wrote his thesis on the future of sports betting, and he thought it would be social. Instead of betting against the sports book, you would bet against, or there would be like a bet matching platform, kind of like Uber. There'd be a marketplace, and they would match people up. And coincidentally, there was two Harvard Business School graduates that decided to start something like that and found Geoff and hired him to basically build their product, to be their product lead. And so while he wasn't the tech guy, he was managing the tech team on building what ended up being called Wager, W-A-G-R. And it was the first social sports book. And so I was kind of following along that journey with him. not thinking at the time like, oh, I should leverage this with my idea, but just wanting to watch him be successful, like you do, you cheer on your friends, and was very exciting. Like, oh, this is cool, startup and sports betting is exciting. And when we moved the last time before we flew out of there, my wife and I had dinner with him, and he was telling us like they were getting ready to launch, and he was very excited, and he was hoping to get a full-time job with them, right? He was a 1099 contractor with them and was hoping to get a full-time offer with some equity and all that. And so about a month later, we had moved to this area, and he sends a little text message out to the guys in that group, who we mainly talk about fantasy football and sports and stuff. And it was an article announcing the launch of Wager. And I read the article and I'm like, dude, that's awesome. Congratulations. Did you get a full-time offer? And he's like, no, they extended my contract another year, but I love the company. It's a great group of people, good mission. It's super exciting. And all of a sudden at that point, I was like, Geoff has a lot of the skills I need to maybe build my business. And so I asked him, I'm like, Geoff, did you sign a non-compete with them? He's like, no, why? I'm like, we need to talk. So I pitched him on the idea. He loved it. He's like, I got to go talk to my wife. He calls me back the next day. He's like, I talked to Megan. She said, sounds great. I just quit my job at Wager. Let's do this. And I'm like, whoa, I hadn't even talked to my wife about it yet, right? Like, so I guess we're doing this. So talked to my wife. Luckily, she was very supportive. And that was it. That was October of 21. And we started everything from there. And then we did a lot of market research for the first couple months, and the boring stuff of incorporating and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
And then started raising money in February. And then as soon as we got some money in, we hired some developers and started developing that February last year, and then went and pitched it at the Fantasy Sports and Gaming Association conference. And so it's like a ton of like the execs from all the fantasy and daily fantasy companies, a couple sports betting companies, those writers. Like, I was totally fanboying the whole time I was there, right? Like, I'm like, I watch your videos online, or I read your articles, like it was super cool to just kind of rub elbows with those people. And did the pitch competition, and it was an audience vote instead of like a little panel. And we ended up winning. And after that, that was validation, right? Like, we always thought we had a good idea. My mom thought I had a good idea, but I was like, is it a good idea? I don't know. And then getting that validation from those experts and leaders in the industry of like, this is a good idea, was awesome. And as a result, like the rest of the conference, we were kind of like the belle of the ball, right? Like, we were always worried as an aggregator, like, we're only valuable if we have these platforms on our app, right? And we were like, oh God, how are we going to get like ESPN and CBS and DraftKings and FanDuel, like these monsters of the industry? How are we going to convince them to get on our little startup, let us get access to their data? And then after that, after winning the pitch competition, people were coming up to us and like, hey, we love your idea. We want to be on your platform. I'm like, what? This is awesome. So that was a big moment for us, and it was really cool. So we ended up submitting the app right before football season to Apple, and then unfortunately it took 3 months to get approved. That was a little bit longer than we expected. So it was mid-November by the time Apple approved it. It was a much longer legal review than, the code review was done pretty quick, a couple weeks, but the legal review took a really long time. Had to get a couple legal opinion letters and things like that, because anything touching sports gambling was like complicated, and it's each state is its own market, so it's not like, oh, you're licensed in the US, you have to get licensed in each individual state. So it was a little complex, but we're now out in the App Store. Unfortunately, by the time we launched, fantasy season was almost over. Our unique value proposition is it's everything all in one, right? So there are a couple of sites that allow you to kind of aggregate your fantasy teams. There's a bunch of startups in the space doing, aggregating your sports bets. But we were like, most people, the majority of people that play or that bet on sports also play fantasy. Like the normal consumer journey is is like mine, right? Like you grew up playing fantasy, as you moved around or went to college or, moved to other jobs, you probably joined other leagues. And so you got into a couple, 2, 3, maybe 4, probably around 2016, 2017, you maybe started playing daily fantasy when those got popular with FanDuel and DraftKings. And then once sports betting got legalized, if you were in a state where that was illegal, then you probably signed up for sports books. And while you watch games, you're worried about how it's affecting your fantasy, how it's affecting your daily fantasy contest and your sports bets. And so, most people that are doing that, they don't want one app that is doing fantasy and one that's doing sports bets, and nobody's doing daily fantasy because it's a lot more complicated. But we wanted to be that all-in-one across all 3 of those pillars. So we're pulling it all in. We've got 9 of the top 12 sports books on our platform. All the big 4: FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, Caesars, and then plus Fox Bet, WinBet, PointsBet, Borgata, and Barstool. And then we've got the ability to aggregate 6 of the top 10 fantasy. So Yahoo's currently operational on the app, but we have the data and are still working on the integrations for ESPN, Sleeper, My Fantasy League, Fantasy Football Players Championship, and National Fantasy Championship. And then have a couple of agreements with some daily fantasy companies to pull their data in. But building those integrations are going to take a little longer because they don't have the APIs, the external APIs, because nobody is aggregating their data at this time. But it's exciting. And hoping to grow this next season, right? Grow slowly, probably over football, basketball, and baseball seasons. I'm sorry, baseball, basketball, and hockey seasons. And then next summer, before football season, when it comes to fantasy and sports betting, football drives a majority of the business. So we expect a big spike probably next summer.
That's great. You mentioned earlier that it is free, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's free to download. It's free to use. Eventually, we'll have ads on the platform. So our idea, our business model is that, we would sell more efficient marketing to the sports books and data daily fantasy companies. So each sports book is building a customer behavior profile on each consumer, right? Like they're trying to figure out you as a consumer, what you like to bet on, what teams, the types of bets you like, what day of the week and times you're possibly betting. They're sending you promotions and seeing which ones you click through, which ones are effective, that kind of stuff. The problem is a lot of people were like me, living in Chicago. I had 5 sports books, right? Like when sports betting got legalized, it was like, hey, deposit $100 and get $300 in free bets or in free, money or whatever. I'm like, I like free money. Yeah. So I signed up for all of them. Right. Each of those companies was building that behavior profile on me, but they were only seeing 20 to 25% of what I was doing. So we would see 100% of all your betting activity, but also we're seeing your daily fantasy activity, which is very similar to prop bets, right? Mm-hmm. And we're seeing your fantasy lineups. So those types of things give us a little more insight to you as a sports fan and as a consumer. And so like, if you're going to Monday Night Football and you've got like, say before that Bills-Bengals game a couple weeks ago, it's the fantasy championship. And we see that you've got Josh Allen as your quarterback and you're down by, 18 points. You may, depending on what your risk profile is like, you might be the type that likes to hedge. And you might be like, oh, I want to bet on a player prop on Josh Allen with the under. So I'll either win the fantasy championship and lose my little bet, or if I lose my fantasy championship, at least I won some money on the bet. If you're kind of a hedge person, or you might be a double down kind of person. You're like, you know what? I'm going over on the Josh Allen and I'm either going to win them both or I'm going to lose them both. And so, little insights that you can pull from that can help, possibly drive more business to those sports books or daily fantasy companies. So we thought, given that holistic view, we could basically build much more effective customer behavior profiles, and then would sell marketing to the sports books. Like, we're not selling the customer's data, but if the sports book comes and it's like, hey, look, I've got this promotion, I want to send it to people that already have, let's use BetMGM, for example. Somebody that has a BetMGM account, it's for this upcoming playoff game, the Bengals and the Ravens, people that are in the Baltimore area, Ravens fans with BetMGM that typically bet on the over, right? Because we've got some promotion that we want to run about the total in the game, or we're trying to lay off some, there's a lot of bets on the under and we need to get some other action on the other side. And so who likes to bet on the over? And we could look and be like, okay, we have, out of the 20,000 people on our platform, we have 5,372 that meet that profile. And then they would send that ad, they give us the ad, we'd put that ad on just those people's profile. And so instead of paying to, for 2,000 impressions, they're only paying for 5,372. And the probability of people clicking through is much higher, right? So they're getting cheaper initial advertising and a more effective, a better click-through rate. So they would like it. And then hopefully we're only showing ads that are relevant to the people, so they would hopefully be happy. So that's the business model. Hopefully it works out, but we're gonna have to, right now it's just me as a data scientist. We're definitely, as we grow, we definitely want to hire on some people that are a little more talented than I am. That's the other thing is I've learned as a leader: surround yourself with people that are a lot smarter than you, right? Like, that's the best way to be successful.
That's great advice. Going into that, actually, Brett, how do you find those people? Surrounding yourself with the right people.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, part of it goes back to the network, right? So reaching out, there's the people that I already know. So when we were talking about hiring a possibly a CMO or a director of marketing, as we knew we were getting ready to launch, I reached back to, we worked in those last 2 years in the Army. I worked with the firm that managed the Army's $4 billion marketing account. Was a company called DDB, and they're one of the best marketing firms in the world. And so I met some really talented people there, and had one specifically in mind that I was like, oh, she would be amazing as our potential director of marketing. Reach out to her, sold her on the idea, but we couldn't quite meet salary needs at this time. Like, she's making really good amount of money right now, is doing well, but we did get her as basically a part-time, a fractional employee. She's basically 1099, so advised us on all our marketing and running our marketing now. So that was one way already in the network. But when it comes to like the developers, definitely from my Army network, there's not many there. Even from the business network, most of them, they may work in tech, but they're not developers. So reaching out to some of those leaders that are, luckily director level or VPs or whatever at the big, what used to be the FANG companies. I'm not sure what the new acronym is with, Meta and Alphabet or whatever, but, reaching out to some people that work in tech and seeing if they know anybody, especially with all the layoffs recently. If asking them for recommendations. The other way is reaching out. Y Combinator has something like a co-founder matching program. So if we're looking for like our lead or founding engineer, that's probably where we're starting.
Mm-hmm.
Looking for somebody that wants to go work at a startup that has that experience, and they kind of make sure that we match. And then hopefully they have a good network in the tech community. And then it's also leaning a little bit on our partners. So we had hired a dev firm out of Houston called Umbridge. They were amazing partners, and they will have committed to helping us hire and help screen and interview and do the technical interviews for us for the people that are basically going to replace them. So that's probably how we'll work that out.
What would you say drives and motivates you?
I would say probably like just solving problems has always been a thing. Whether it was like, growing up doing logic puzzles or, whatever, I enjoy that kind of stuff. Video games that I played probably were some of them kind of problem solving type things. But that's what I loved about being an engineer, right? Was or as an ORSA, you would a lot of times be brought a problem, but sometimes it was like go out and find what the problems are in our organization. Talk to all the stakeholders and identify where the inefficiencies are. I like making things better, and it's also replacing some of the service, right? Like I felt bad. I look at a lot of my peers who retired out of the Army and started a business, and they're like combating veteran suicide or veteran homelessness, or helping people with PTSD and like doing these things that are like making the world a better place. And I'm like, I'm making it easier for people that want to watch sports, right? Like I'm not having like a huge social impact. So, but I am hopefully making people's lives a little easier, right? And if they are, sports and entertainment is an escape, right? So if that's what makes you happy and that's what you enjoy, I want to make that a better experience for you. And then hopefully, the thing that probably drives me more than solving problems is like leadership. And leadership is really just relationships with people, right? And trying to make the organization and the people better, helping people grow, and making a good organization that they feel connected to. So hopefully we'll grow and I'll be able to help them either grow in our organization, or if they decide that, at some point they need to move on to something else, help them grow in that next opportunity. So
having built now Bettor Vision and where you are today, if an entrepreneur came to you and they wanted to start their own business, it doesn't matter what industry they're thinking of, any advice or suggestions you would give that person?
Oh my God. So many, like it goes back to the like you learn so much from what you've done wrong. Oh my God, I've got a laundry list of things that I would have done different. I would say early on, spend a lot of time doing market research, right? Like that's something I think we did relatively well. We definitely could have done it better, but like it's worth paying for some of the sites that aggregate some of that data, because you need to really understand your problem, right? Ideally, if you've got if you're doing a startup, you've identified that there's a need in the market, right? So that's a problem that you're going to bring a solution to. So understanding that problem and your target consumer early on is so important, because if you miss that, like it doesn't matter what your solution is. If you're not addressing the need, or you don't understand the customer, how are you going to communicate that? So the solution is less important than understanding those two. And then the other piece is you've got to get comfortable with selling, right? Like as a CEO, which is something that I am not. That's not my strong suit, right? Like I'm good at the analytics, might be good at some leadership type stuff, people skills, but when it comes to selling, that is something I'm very uncomfortable with. And as a CEO, you're constantly doing it, right? Like whether you're selling the business to raise money, right? Like you're pitching it to whether it's your angel investors or your friends and family, or eventually venture capitalists, or you're pitching it to partners that you're going to need to run the business, or you're pitching it to employees to like, you got to convince someone to take a massive risk to come work for you. And then even once they're on the team, like kind of having your North Star, that you are constantly keeping them all going in the same direction and motivated going towards that goal. It is a lot of, you need to understand what it is that's going to drive those people, and that's going to convince the investors and those partners to want to be a part of what you're doing. So get comfortable with that, take some classes if you're not good at it, and just practice, right? And you got to be comfortable with failure. That was something I had worked in for so long in the Army, where like if you fail, people get hurt or die, and we're very risk averse, especially in aviation, right? Like it's a lot of things can go wrong, and there's no parachutes in a helicopter, right? Like if the helicopter crashes, most times there are fatal accidents. So a very risk averse, organization which was not comfortable with failure. You need to very quickly get comfortable with being told no. You're gonna get told no a lot more than you're gonna get told yes, and you're gonna do things wrong a lot early on. Just focus on learning from it and then trying to do it a little better the next time. Don't get discouraged, because it is a roller coaster, right? Like it's try not to get too high on the good days and try not to get too low, because there's a lot of hard times, and you gotta just keep going. So be comfortable with that roller coaster ride, but it's awesome. It's very exciting. So
What's the biggest challenge with your role today at Bettor Vision?
It's probably two things, right? Like we're getting ready to raise our seed round, so we're kind of closing out our pre-seed round and getting ready to shift, and still trying to find product market fit. So it's a lot of things at once. Closing out that round, getting out there in the market and doing all the marketing, trying to make sure we get to the consumers in a way that makes them want to download the app. And then using the metrics from what we're seeing to basically sell the next round of investors in the seed round. So the biggest challenge is figuring out what are the right metrics? I've got an idea of what we should be measuring and what's important to our business, but it may be different from the investor's perspective, right? So I'm trying to really look at what is it that's going to be important to them and blend those two. And some of it's like, okay, I need to show them what they want to see, but some of it is I need to tell them this is what's important for this business, right? Like even if that's maybe not what you're used to, this is what's important for measuring whether this is going to be a successful business, and this is why. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges is figuring out how that's going to go. And it's a big unknown for me right now. So, yeah.
How is the raise coming along for the seed round?
So we haven't started the seed in.
Okay.
We'll probably start that in February. The thought was we would we raised the pre-seed, built the product, launched it, and then try to find product market fit basically through the end of football season. So through the Super Bowl, and after the Super Bowl, we would evaluate at that time, did we find product market fit? We hope so. We think so. If that's true, then we'll go to try to raise a seed round. If we decide, we don't think we quite made it yet, maybe we need to continue growing and reaching more people, then we would probably pivot and continue marketing through probably March Madness, the next kind of major sporting spike in the sports betting calendar, and then do the seed raise after that. So haven't started the seed raise, but pre-seed, we raised about $750,000. So that was pretty good. I was excited, very, very grateful for those people that put that trust in us, right? Like we're first-time founders, both of us. And I've talked to a lot of people, and they're talking about what you need to do to evaluate founders, and it's like, well, is this their first startup? Well, then no. I'm like, well, everybody starts somewhere, so yeah. Finding those people that were willing to put that faith and trust in us as first-time founders was very humbling, right? Like I'm very grateful for those people and hope to reward them significantly someday.
Yeah.
So
coming to an end here soon, Brett. What do you know now that you wish you would have known at the start of your business career? Two big things. One, everything takes longer than you expect, right? When it comes to the development timeline, how long it would take to get things,
when it comes to like reaching out and getting the partnerships. Even once we won that pitch competition and we had all those initial conversations, I'm like, this is going to be great. And then it takes, because especially the bigger companies, the decision cycle on how many people you have to go through to get to the, okay, yes, we're going to do this. It takes a long time. Apple, oh my God, was expecting a couple of weeks at most, from what we had originally thought. And now 3 months later, they finally got approved. Or when we started trying to advertise on Twitter, because we are associated with gambling, our ad account got frozen and like suspended. And it's like the process to go through to like let them know, like we are licensed in 18 in like the 24 states where mobile sports betting is legal. I'm like, here's all our licenses. We can do this. We need you to approve this. It takes a really long time for them to reply and get back to you. We're doing marketing right now out at tailgates and at sports bars, which is where our target consumers go, right? Like to go watch the game. They go to the game and they tailgate, or they go to sports bars to watch the game. So we're going to those, but finding getting the partnerships with the sports bars has taken significantly longer than we expected. We thought like, oh yeah, we'll go pitch them the idea and like, talk to the GM and in a week or so we'll schedule, for the next game. And it's taken 3 or 4 weeks to get to yes for a lot of them. Some of them were still pending. So everything takes longer is one. And two is always be raising, right? Like when you like don't get comfortable early on, we raised a lot of money pretty quick. And I was like, oh, sweet, this is awesome. In the first couple of months, I think we got to like 500,000 by like May. And so we very much focused on the product for a while in developing the app and designing it. And then when I went back, I was like, oh, in a couple more months, we're going to need, we've only got 4 or 5 months of runway. Like I need to raise a little bit more money. And all of a sudden the world had changed, right? Like everything with Ukraine kicked off and it went from like the easiest time ever to raise money to like a very difficult time where no one really wanted to invest. So not losing that momentum and, the practice of pitching and, you're constantly going to need money, right? So you kind of constantly have to be out there looking. As soon as we close the pre-seed round, we'll start the seed round, and I'm sure we'll raise that. And when that closes, I'll probably start talking to whoever might developing those relationships. We might not raise for another 7 months, but you're going to start developing the relationships for that Series A round. So constantly probably need to be prepared to raise money.
Where do you see the future for Bettor Vision? What do you think is the end goal there?
Ideally, what I'd love to run it for a long time, right? Like, when we talk exit strategy, I think we could potentially get acquired. There's going to be a lot of consolidation in this industry. I think it's sports betting is blowing up right now. Obviously, it went from, I think in 2019, it was like $3 billion of betting in the US. This year, I think through October, it was 80 billion. It'll probably be over 100 for the year, I would assume. It'll probably more than double next year. Like
wow,
in the next
that's
2 or
amazing
3
growth.
years, it'll be like $300 billion. So there's a lot of startups in the space, and there's a lot of people that are jumping in, but eventually it's going to consolidate, right? Like there's not enough to go around for everybody. So there will probably be some acquisitions. We may be one of them that gets acquired. Ideally, I'd like to keep running it and see it to the vision of where we have it, where you can have all of your sports books, all your day fantasy, all your fantasy all in place, and it hopefully is the second screen of choice for people while they're watching the game, right? Like if you're watching the game, Lamar throws a touchdown to Mark Andrews, you quickly look down and see how it affects your bets or your fantasy, and you're back to watching the game. So you're not really missing the action as opposed to like scrolling through all your different apps trying to see how it affected everything. But if we, grew it to having, 10 million people on it or something like that. There's 74 million people in the US that either bet on sports or play fantasy. 54 million do both. If we can get to 20% of those people on our platform, that would be amazing. And maybe at that point, if somebody's like, okay, I want to acquire your company, if I think it's a good fit and they're going to take it to a good place, yeah, that would be cool. And then maybe go coach some high school sports.
Right now, Brett, is there anyone doing similar to what Bettor Vision does?
There are a couple, and we do have some competitors, again, in the vertical of sports bet tracking. Nobody else. We are the only one that is doing it across both fantasy and sports betting.
Oh, that's great.
But there are some companies that are doing some good things. I mean, some of them that I used prior to starting this, but it wasn't exactly the experience I was looking for. So, couple others out there, but nobody yet doing this. We'll see if some of them pivot if we're successful, or if someone else starts to see us be successful and comes along. But again, like if we can get to 20% of the market, that'd be amazing. So there's enough room for a couple other competitors, I think.
Okay, so greatest of all time: Jordan, LeBron, or Kobe?
I mean, I'm biased, right? Like I'm a Jordan guy. I love LeBron. He's amazing. He combines a little bit of two of my favorite players, right? Or I guess really probably my three favorite players. He kind of has a bit of all of them, who are Magic, Bird, and Jordan, right? Like those were the guys I grew up on, and like Magic's like vision and passing, Bird's like basketball IQ and competitiveness, and then the Jordan, I guess competitiveness and ability to score and just dominate physically, kind of all together. So I do love LeBron, but like, yeah, I go back and watch some highlights, and they're different eras, so it's hard to compare. But like, you're like, oh, the game that Larry Bird decided he was just going to shoot, he was only going to play with his left hand, and he had like a 40-point triple double playing with his offhand, right? Like, some of these guys were incredible, and going back and watching Jordan just absolutely dominate, or listen to guys that were NBA players after he retired and he was owning at the time Bobcats and the Hornets, talking about like 50-year-old Jordan, guy in his mid-50s, being pissed at him after a loss, coming on and absolutely schooling them in practice, right? Like them in peak physical 24, 25-year-old condition, and Jordan in his mid-50s just absolutely dominating them. I'm just like, yeah, Jordan's greatest. Sorry.
Jordan.
And
okay.
Love Kobe, but like he's just under that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Favorite aircraft to fly and why?
Ooh. So I've only flown 3, and 2 are similar. So one's the TH-67, which is a little Bell helicopter, like a news helicopter. One is the OH-58, similar to the Kiowa Warrior, the little scout helicopter. It's built off that the TH-67 frame as well. Those are very similar, very small helicopters. And then the Black Hawk. The Black Hawk has power, right? Like you're never worried, or you're very rarely worried if you're going to have enough power to fly and do some maneuvers. And there's all kinds of like advanced features. But it's a beast. It's big. It's the size of a bus, right? Like a school bus. Like you don't realize it is massive. The rotors are like 55 feet across. It's like 60 something feet long. So it's hard to kind of be as kind of cool and nimble, where in flight school flying the OH-58, like we're down in the trees, like flying along riverbeds. We did a little of that in Baghdad at times, flying through downtown between the buildings and stuff. But for the most part, I'm not doing that a lot in the Black Hawk. And you can in that 58. So the 58's fun. But again, if it gets too hot, or if you've got, one extra person on board, or you had a big lunch, like you might be worried you got enough power at times to get out of a bad situation. So, Oh, that's a hard toss up. This is like the LeBron Jordan. I'm gonna go Blackhawk just because it's what I flew most, right? I've got 1,000-something hours in that. So we've shared some of those tough times together. We've been shot up together. So I'll go Blackhawks.
Go with the beast. Okay.
Yeah.
Brett, when you're not busy working and building the company, what do you like to do for fun in your free time?
Wow. So I don't have a lot of free time, building the company. It's a grind. It's takes most of my time. But I'm playing with my kids. Whether we were playing a board game or something like that, or just whatever they're into, just meeting them where they are, or watching sports, right? Like, so if I have free time now, it's watching the Ravens or the Terps or the Orioles when they're in season. That's probably what I do most of the time.
Great. If people want to learn more about you and Bettor Vision, where can they go to, please?
Yeah, so they could go to www.bettorvision, that's BETTOR VISION.US, which is our website, or search for us in the Apple Store and check out the app. We are running a sweepstakes right now, to get the word out. So we're giving away 2 tickets to the Super Bowl plus airfare and hotels, 2 tickets to the NBA All-Star Weekend. So that's both Saturday night, the dunk contest, skills contest, 3-point shootout, all that, and Sunday the actual All-Star game plus 2 nights hotel and airfare, or 3 big screen TVs. So if they Google Bettor Vision sweepstakes, it should come up. But the website is Bettor Vision bucket list giveaway. So basically, as a sports fan, there's some bucket list things that, like, I want to go do these someday. I'm not going to get to do these. I'll go and hand them the tickets and let them go watch the games, but trying to give away some experiences so they can check that out. That's free to enter. It runs for about another 2 weeks. That's probably the best way. Or follow us on Twitter or Facebook. That's where we put out a lot of our social media.
Awesome. Brett, thank you so much for coming on. I had a ton of fun.
Yeah, really appreciate it, Otto.
My pleasure. Take care.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.